Before this goes anywhere, I want to name something quietly. You don't have to agree with any of this. You don't have to react to it. You don't even have to decide what you think while you're listening. This isn't an argument, it's an observation. You're free to take from it what fits, leave what doesn't, and let the rest pass without resistance. There's a feeling that keeps showing up lately. It's strong, it's familiar, and it doesn't take much effort to stumble onto it. Unrest. Anger shows up fast. It spreads fast. It feels justified fast. You open your phone, scroll for a few minutes, and suddenly the world feels like it's on fire. And what's interesting isn't that people feel angry. That part makes sense. What's interesting is how easy it is to stay there. I've noticed something in myself when I get pulled into that loop. Most of the time, it has very little to do with the actual content. I'm not scrolling because I'm deeply informed. I'm not scrolling because I'm about to take action. I'm scrolling because it's an escape from responsibility, from action, from improving something directly in front of me, from getting after what I already know needs attention. The content almost doesn't matter. What matters is that it has pull. And the stuff that pulls the hardest is always the same kind of thing. The most upsetting, the most divisive, the most emotionally charged. There's a reason for that. Look at how information gets delivered. Morning news is light, fluff, easy to digest. People aren't ready to carry anything heavy first thing in the day. But by the evening, the tone changes. That's when the dirty stuff comes out. The stories that lock you in. The ones that keep you watching. Because outrage captivates. It holds attention. It feels important. And slowly, without much resistance, something shifts. What might have started as intentional, escaping from something, venting about something, justifying a feeling, turns into momentum. Now it's not something you choose. It's just something you do. And when something becomes automatic like that, a few things quietly get lost. Control, self-awareness, and maybe most importantly, that moment of silence long enough to notice what's actually going on inside of you. External stimulation replaces internal exploration fast. Faster than most people realize. And when there's always something agreeing with you, or something giving you a reason to agree with it, you don't have to sit with uncertainty. You don't have to weigh things. You don't have to think slowly. You don't have to tolerate not knowing. I think that's part of why emotional instability feels so common right now. Not because people are weak, not because they're incapable, but because there's always something ready to tell you how to feel, and ready to reinforce it immediately. Over time, that does something to a person's confidence in their own judgment. Not in a dramatic way, but in a subtle one. Confidence doesn't just disappear, it gets distorted. Sometimes it gets reinforced. Not because the thinking is solid, but because it's echoed. Other times it degrades because everything feels overwhelming and unsolvable. Either way, the center gets harder to find. Instead of individual judgment, you get pooled emotion, a mass of feeling that doesn't really belong to any one person. And that's where things start to feel dangerous. Not because people care, but because caring without clarity turns into something else. When you're inside that kind of outrage, it's easy to assume something about people who aren't reacting the same way. That they don't care, that they don't know, that they wouldn't understand. But that assumption usually isn't true. Sometimes distance from outrage doesn't come from ignorance. It comes from experience, from weighing things slowly, from seeing the same pattern show up under different names, from learning how often emotion gets mistaken for insight. When someone says you wouldn't understand, it often isn't about the listener at all. It's a way of protecting something internal, a way of keeping the suffering personal while staying inside the herd. And that contradiction is hard to sit with, because outrage feels active. It feels like participation. It feels like doing something. But most of the time, it asks very little of you. You don't have to change anything locally. You don't have to confront your own inertia. You don't have to risk being uncomfortable or wrong. You just have to keep reacting. And reaction can quietly replace responsibility. The cost isn't always obvious at first. It shows up later. In reduced patience for nuance, in less tolerance for silence, and a shrinking ability to sit with complexity without reaching for a conclusion. When everything is framed as urgent or catastrophic, thinking for yourself starts to feel unnecessary or even threatening. And that's the part that's easy to miss. Because when thinking becomes outsourced, judgment follows. And when judgment follows, action either goes in the wrong direction or doesn't happen at all, which raises a quieter question underneath all this. Not about the country, not about the news, not about the argument of the week, but about the individual. If outrage keeps you busy, keeps you stimulated, keeps you emotionally engaged, what does it keep you from noticing in your own life? And if you ever stepped away from it, not forever, just long enough to regain your footing, what responsibility might you finally have to face? What is it costing you to stay inside the outrage instead of sitting still long enough to think for yourself?